Alrighty, we're live. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. Hope everybody's good morning. Hope it's not too late where you are. Hope everybody's having a wonderful day today. If you're tuning in for the first time, welcome. Hi, we're doing a free JavaScript and web development bootcamp. You will find all of the information here in the Class Central URL. Please join in if you're just chilling for the wonderful session we've got for you today. Awesome. Welcome. Lovely to have you. Let's talk about what we're going to be doing today. So I'm going to bring on our guest speaker for today, who's going to give us a presentation called Everyone Matters, an inclusive approach to design, development, and testing. So I'm about to bring on our guest, and here he comes. Here's Parham. Welcome, Parham. You are live.
Hi, very great to be here, and thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to talk to starting designers and developers and testers of the future.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Parham. I'm gonna, if I may, embarrass you just a tiny bit, if I may. Parham, here you
Oh
are.
no.
You are an engineering manager at Booking.com. You are a life coach. You are joining us from the Netherlands. Are you in Amsterdam or
I'm
Rotterdam?
like 15 minutes away in this commute town called Purmerend, but for all intents and purposes, I'm in Amsterdam.
Gotcha. And
I'm gonna be super mean. Hello. I'm supposed to be backstage, but I'm actually Parham. Is it overstepping to say we're friends?
No, no,
Oh, good. And
I'm always there when you're doing things you shouldn't be doing. Yes,
that's never happened.
yes,
I have
okay.
never done anything. But I wanted to pop on and say one thing that our learners may have already noticed, and our guests may have already noticed, is that Parham is both exceptionally cute and exceptionally calm. I will pop back off stage, having embarrassed you.
I was about to do that. Thank you, Jess, for beating me to the punch. Yes. Do we so yes, it's wonderful to have you here with us, Parham. Thank you so much. And the last thing I'm going to share about you is that you are a screen reader user.
Yes, and I can get more into that in a little bit.
Excellent. Well, let's before I let you get started, just a little bit of how this is going to work. Parham is going to be wonderful and is going to present to us today. And in the meantime, I will be here just chilling here with Jess. We're going to be making sure everybody's behaving in the chat. But at the same time, should questions come up, I will very, very politely ask them to Parham, not to interrupt you too much, but yeah, I'll read out the question and you can answer it, and so we'll flow that way. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Thanks.
Wonderful. In that case, yes, I'm gonna stop talking now. I will just be chilling here and let you have at it. Thank you again, Parham.
Nice. Great. So another hello. And so before I get into accessibility and all that nice stuff I wanted to talk about, let me tell you a little bit about me. So I was born completely blind, and it's almost my birthday. Oh my God. It's on the 7th of February, 1990. So I was born in Iran. I grew up until 5 years ago. I used to live in Iran as well, and then I moved to the Netherlands to work at Booking. So my background is in engineering. I've been a developer for 10 years professionally, and my work hasn't really been in accessibility. I've just been a user of accessibility for most of the time. But because of the fact that I've had to go and talk with a lot of developers to make their websites accessible, I've had to basically learn accessibility through using it. And what I'm hoping we can do is, as I'm explaining stuff and as you have questions, Ramon and Jess would pop in to say, hey, here's a question about what you're talking about, so that we can make this more of a conversation and talking with each other as opposed to me talking to you
Ab-
in a one
ab-
way.
Absolutely. In fact, we've already got Toasty Marshmallow here. Wishing
I
you a
always
happy
love the really like fun names here. Last time I was here, I learned a whole lot of information about animals in Australia. Sorry, just
no
had to say
way.
that.
No, that's wonderful. So Toasty Marshmallow is wishing you a happy almost birthday.
Thank you, Toasty Marshmallow. I will be sure to toast some marshmallows in my birthday. I think only problem's going to be building a fire, but I'll pull in Ramon and Jess to help with that.
I'm
I love the
sorry.
implications. You're like, oh, if you need fires, the
You bring
boot
the
camp
fire starters.
teachers, like, yeah. You know
Yeah.
who's great at no. We'll
No.
talk.
Okay. When we're done, we're gonna set up a fire anyway. But okay, cool. So, okay, a little bit about screen readers specifically, because looking at the schedule, I think you've had other speakers covering different areas. So let me tell you a little bit about how screen readers work, so that you can imagine how they behave, so that as you're writing code, you can actually kind of like have that mindset, and then most of the issues will be averted just because you know how screen readers work. So screen readers basically can't see the screen. So what they do is they ask the operating system and your browser to provide information to them. So when I press tab and I land on something, then the screen reader is asking Chrome or Firefox, like, hey, what is this thing that he just landed on? And then Chrome says, it's a button. The label is okay. And that's it. You tell Parham whatever you're supposed to tell him. And then the screen reader tells me, okay, button, which means I'm landing on this button and the title is okay. And I can click on it. The fact that it's a button means I can press space or enter or anything like that. And then stuff happens. And as you can imagine, there are different components. I bet you've learned about checkboxes, for example, which are a little bit more tricky because they also have a state. So is it checked or is it unchecked? Now, the problem is if a developer does not provide this information, the screen reader doesn't know what to say. So maybe I just hear button. Maybe I just hear okay. Maybe I just hear checkbox unchecked. And then I'm like, what happens if I check this? Does my house catch fire, or uh, is Ramon or just coming over here and toasting marshmallows? I have no clue what's going to happen when I click this button. And so that's why it's really important that you follow the ARIA guidelines or the WCAG guidelines, which I'll get to a little bit, so that the screen reader actually knows what is in focus, what I'm supposed to be doing, and provides me that information so that I can interact with it. I'll pause and act as if that was a paragraph because I was talking for 5 minutes straight, and then see if there's anyone asking any questions.
So we've got no questions so far,
Nice.
but
It
you're doing
means I'm
great.
a great explainer. Nice.
Folks, I encourage you, please bring in those questions. This is, we're all learning together here. We're all in, having a good time together.
I've got questions.
Oh,
Oh no.
Okay. So are you going to tell us about WCAG guidelines later? Like, should we wait on the questions for those? Is there going to be a big reveal?
I want to get into WCAG now. So if you have a question, which is a great leeway into that or segue, there's a way.
What's a
some way.
WCAG? Who's in charge of that? What's that deal?
Yep. So let me look at my notes. No, just kidding. So
I was going to say, I was like, suspicious,
you're supposed to know
excited
that
with this
stuff.
language choice.
Yeah. So WCAG is short for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and it's created by basically the people that define standards for the web. And what it's supposed to do is give guidelines and basically the same language for people to talk about accessibility and what each of these bits and pieces that I just talked to you about, like checkbox and button and stuff, what those actually are. For example, it talks about let's say you have a span that is actually a button, which happens for some reason very often, and I hate them. So when my screen reader sees a span, it doesn't know that it's a button. Which means I don't know that I can click on it because it just tells me okay, and I'm like, okay, what? And then it just says okay. And so what those guidelines talk about is how can you tell a screen reader that this is actually a button? How do you write the code? And it has a lot of examples about here's a span. That's actually something you can click on. How can you make a screen reader understand how that works? And you can basically copy paste those examples, and your website will be a lot more usable than if you didn't use them.
We got a comment from Jolene who says it's really cool to hear how screen readers work.
Nice. Yeah, I think one way that I would really suggest you all do this is there are very easy ways to get a screen reader and actually try it out. The best people are people that actually have screen readers and they test the code after they've written it to see that it actually works with a screen reader. I really love those people. So if you want to be one of those people that I really, really love, here's how. If you're using Windows, you can just go and download NVDA. I don't know if anyone can put the link for that in the chat, but that would be nvda-project.org. So that's November Victor Delta Alpha -project.org. So that's a screen reader that's free and open source on Windows. If you're on Mac, you can just press Command and F5 to turn on VoiceOver, which is a screen reader that's built into the Mac. If you have one of these touch strips that are new in the newer MacBooks, you need to hold down Command and press the power button, the one that has a fingerprint scanner, 3 times. So hold down Command and press the button 3 times, and then it will turn on VoiceOver. You can basically Google for these instructions, pretty easy. But then each of these, when you turn them on for the first time or install NVDA, they give you a tutorial of how to use a screen reader, which might be a little bit of a weird experience because you can already see the screen. But one, it's a great way to see what you're missing. And two, it's a really great way to see what people who actually can't see are missing. So it's a great way to test out what is and isn't exposed from your application to a screen reader.
It's really cool to have a way to be able to access that right away. We got a couple of questions that I'd love to read to you. Patricia is asking, is there a problem to have a button inside a span?
Yeah, so the problem is not that a button is in a span. The problem usually happens when a span is supposed to act on a button. So to make that very, very specific, if you had a code that triggered when I clicked on a span, that's when it gets problematic. If you have a button element and then when I click on it, something happens, that's perfect. It doesn't really matter if that button element is in a span or in a div or in any other I guess element. What matters is that you use things for what they're supposed to be used for. Wait, let me say that again. Use things for what they're supposed to be used for. So if you're using a text box, don't make that a drop down. If you have a span, don't make that a button. If you're using a checkbox, don't make that a, I don't know, text box. And it sounds weird, but people actually do that stuff. And this is called semantic markup. And semantic markup is basically using HTML elements for what they're supposed to be used for. So if you have an text box, you use the input component or the input tag with the type set to text, and you don't use anything else. if you have a button, you use a button, or you use a input type button, or you use something like that. You don't actually use a div or a span, or I don't know, uh, an I or B, which is a bold, or a heading, or anything like that. You actually use tags for what they're supposed to be used for, and that makes it a lot easier for the screen reader to pick that up, because the browser already tells the screen reader, hey, this developer told me by using the button tag that this is a button and the label is okay. So you don't really need to do anything like that. When you do start using a span as a button and stuff like that, then you have to write extra code to tell the browser that, hey, this is a span, but can you pretend it's a button? And hey, or like, hey, this is a text box, but can you pretend like it's a drop down? Because for some reason I chose to use a text box instead of it. So that's basically your if you're using the correct semantic markup, then you're saving yourself and the browser and the screen reader and the user that's using all of that stuff a lot of pain.
That's awesome to hear. Like, and it's great that these things are being that they're built in.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
got another question here from is it Robiol? I'm so sorry if I got that wrong. Is there a difference between what's the difference between the ADA and the WCAG?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. And one is an act in a law. So that's the Americans Disabilities Act. So that's a law that is in the US. And the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are created to make ADA actually happen on the web, because like ADA is originally for actual physical spaces. And then at some point the web came along and these people were like, wait, what is that? How can I make something physical apply to something virtual? And there was a lot of like changes to the text, but it was still kind of vague. And a lot of people were asking, well, but what does this mean? How can I make this actually happen in real life? And then Wcag was formed, which gives you very specific advice down to the, hey, if you are using this tag in HTML, you should be doing this extra stuff to make it accessible and all of that stuff. And it's also very useful for making more, I guess, tricky components happen, like sliders or tree views or menus and stuff like that, that you don't really have any HTML markup for. And those are standards that are part of the WCAG to actually make that stuff accessible.
Awesome. Thank you. Don't see any more questions for now, so I think we can carry on if you like.
Keep on moving. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me do a little bit of recap, because I'm dumping a lot of information here. First of all, a screen reader asks a browser, what have you got for me? And then the browser, using the information that's in the code that you wrote, provides some stuff. There are multiple ways to tell a browser what to provide. One way is to use semantic markup, which is if there's a button, you use a button. If there is a text box, you just use the input type text and all of that stuff. One other way is to use ARIA, which is part of the WCAG, which is, first of all, if you, for some reason, cannot follow the semantic markup, you can tell the browser, hey, can you pretend that this is a button? And can you pretend that this is a text box, and all of that. Or if you have more complicated components like sliders, menus, tree views, all of that stuff, you can tell the browser, hey, this is a tree view, and these are the items in the tree view, and all of that. And you can find really good examples of how to actually code these things, because it requires a lot of JavaScript code for these more interactive elements. So you can really find a lot of code there. So if you ever have to write something like that, it should be very easy for you to find examples that you can borrow from.
Awesome. So the questions came in. Can I read you some more, please?
Yeah, sure. I
All
like the
right.
smile in your voice.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was smiling. So we got a question from Galbrush asking, apart from providing alt text and information on content on websites, are there layout conventions that are particularly good from an accessibility standpoint? Such as, so for example, that is the order of components and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So that's a great question because it points to why you might actually want to use a screen reader. And these are things that you cannot guess at unless you can parse HTML in your head, which you might be able to. But if you're not able to, this is a great opportunity to actually use a screen reader in real life and see, oh, is it reading things in the right order? Because if you're not careful, then you could use, or another developer could use CSS to move things around visually, even though when you're looking at the HTML, they are in a different order. And then what happens is there's a disconnect between how a sighted person would see what's on the screen versus how a screen reader user would see what's on the screen. And the ways that that could be a problem is, for example, one issue that we discovered on booking.com is that the hotel description is actually after the reviews. So imagine every time you're looking at the hotel, before you could look at the description, which is the thing you want to look at, you have to go through all the reviews. And it's like, imagine you have to look at like 200 hotels. You're going to be bored out of your mind. So the way to prevent this kind of stuff is to actually use a screen reader to test if things are actually working. Some companies do research studies. um, I, I think probably that might be something interesting. But the best way to actually figure this out is practice testing your own changes through a screen reader.
Cool, thank you. And we got a couple more. Got a question from Martin asking, screen readers support multiple languages. That is, if my page is in English, can the screen reader translate it into Spanish?
Oh, would be nice, right? No. So what I usually do with that situation is I just use Chrome and its translate feature, because a screen reader basically just has code to turn information that it gets from the operating system into audio or Braille, which is like a, Braille is basically some dots that how can I explain Braille in a short amount of time? Braille is basically a way that blind people write. Is that good enough? So because of the fact that we cannot use pen and paper, what we do is that we use machines previously that have pins, and they basically punch holes in paper, and there are 6 dots in Braille, and all the characters are actually made up of these combinations of these dots. And so a screen reader can either turn speech into audio, turn the data from the operating system into speech, or
Right.
it could also turn that data into Braille and pass it over to what we call a Braille display, which is an electronic way to basically show Braille. So imagine you have an 80 character screen that can only show one line at a time. That's
Right.
what a Braille display basically looks like. And then but that's basically it. The screen reader is only there to provide information in either speech or audio. It does not do anything else, because if just that is very complicated. Because, for example, a screen reader allows me to drag, well, to click on things, or hold down the mouse button and hold it, like release the mouse button and all of that stuff, which is already a lot of functionality. So that's why things like translation and stuff, that's like stuff that you have to use other programs to do.
Gotcha. Thank you for answering that. Um, got another one from Bhavin asking, do screen readers describe images?
Oh, another nice one. No. So there are initiatives to make this happen. Like Facebook has its own basically automatic alt text generator. Twitter has its own automatic alt text generator, and Chrome has its own functionality to basically send images to some server that Google owns and then generate alt text for images. But the problem is that AI in general does not understand the context of an image. So if you, for example, have um, a, a person standing next to a car, and I just hear this, a person standing next to a car, I like a context that a human can provide is I don't know, an office worker wearing a suit standing next to the car they just bought or something like that, which is not stuff that an AI can provide because it just does not have the context. And that's why manually providing alternative text is the best, because even though these, I guess, machines can generate text, it's in the best case scenario, it's just a description of what is in the image and has no context. And most of the time, they don't even get that right because we're in the very beginning stages of image recognition.
Yeah, I think I've seen sometimes that some of these places will sort of automatically try and guess it, and it's oftentimes not that, not that accurate. I think, for example, on Twitter, I've seen that it just turns it into image.
Yeah, that's when Twitter gives up. It's like image.
Yeah,
That's what I know. It's an image.
exactly. Cool. We
Yeah,
gotta.
I think
Sorry.
they get a little bit more able to parse stuff when there is text in the image.
Right.
Um, so previously, like today, I had to contact IT support at Booking for some reason, and they said, "Here, look at the screenshot. See how this is the right thing to do." And I was like, "Ouch!" And um, the Chrome image recognition just said, like, hey, here is what this text is saying, and that gave me an idea of, oh, it must be this page, and this person must be focused on this area, and that stuff might be going on. So, like,
Mm,
when there is actual text, it's more useful. But when there is stuff like water and person and car and sky, then it's not really useful, because the point is not to list the things in the image. The point is to explain the relation that they have to each other and the reason they're there.
cool. Oh, we got a lot of questions here. I hope we're not keeping you too behind schedule, Parham.
No,
Huh?
no, I said it's a conversation. No worries.
Excellent. Well, then I've got some more questions. One from Sweat and Cookies, who's asking, I've seen some website makers have an accessibility checker. If I'm building my site from VS Code or somewhere else, how would I test my overall accessibility of my site?
Yeah, that's a great one. I think it depends on you. Um, I'll basically list your options and let you pick. Um, the best way is to do what a person with a disability does. So load your page, zoom out to, I don't know, 170% or 210%, um, and then see what happens. Does your text box keep its shape? Does your paragraph um, actually get hyphenated in the right place? And does it wrap the right way? I don't know. Does your icon get as big as the text, or does it stay small? And all of those stuff. Like when you're zooming, does the page break? That's one way. When you're using something with a screen reader, does the order of components make sense? Are the components actually recognized the right way? Is what's supposed to be a button actually a button, and all of that stuff? So that's the best one. Um, a screen reader might be hard, but even that's pretty easy. There are a lot of YouTube videos showing you the bare minimum that you need to learn to test a website with a screen reader. But Zoom is pretty easy. You can basically just do that with any browser. Um, with a mouth wand, for example, which is when someone is paralyzed from the neck down, what they use is they use something called mouth wand to move focus between different elements and type stuff in text boxes, basically just pretend like you only have tab, shift tab, and your keyboard, like Q, W, E, R, T, and all of that stuff. Just don't use the mouse, and then see is everything on the page reachable. When I press space, does the checkbox get activated or deactivated? Do the toggle buttons actually stay toggled or untoggled when I press tab away from them, and all of those kind of like functionalities. So to wrap up all of that, the easiest way to do it is to just open your page, press tab and shift tab and see if you can access stuff, zoom in to 210% and see if your page breaks. And if you can test it with a screen reader, even better.
Fantastic. Thank you. Got
Sorry, I forgot one part of the question. Can I answer more?
Please, please.
Great. Okay. You were also asking, can I just use an automated way to check this stuff? You can, but the authors of those tools, even the paid, super expensive tools, agree that these tools gather only minimum information as compared to a human, and they can give you 25 to 30% of the issues, nothing more. So, for example, that tool cannot test if the tab order is correct. It cannot test
Right.
if the button is actually a button, because it just doesn't know what your intentions are. Only you as the coder know what each of these elements should be, and that's where only your brain can help.
Yeah, that's a great point. And here we've got another question from Srinatha. I hope I said that correctly. I'm very sorry. Asking, can we validate large and dynamic sites with their changing permutations? If you could
Yeah.
please explain.
Yeah, sure. So the same methods that I just talked about, they all apply. So
Yeah.
let's say you're in Facebook, you want to see, hey, I wonder if Facebook deals well with Zoom, and there's this infinite scroll that basically makes things move and shift and change, and then you just zoom into 210% and see what happens. Or you turn on voiceover and start navigating between different headings and buttons and links and see what happens. Or you start pressing tab and then see what happens. So the fact that a website is dynamic does not mean that it's not accessible, or it cannot be made accessible. All of the web content accessibility guidelines that I was talking about is actually specifically created for dynamic sites, because if you're just having like some static HTML, it's really easy to make it accessible. Things get really tricky though when you click a button and then suddenly text appears. Holy crap, where did that come from? And how do you report that to a screen reader user? Like, how do you tell a screen reader, oh, watch out, new stuff just appeared? And those are things where it gets a little bit tricky.
Right.
And the web content accessibility guidelines and ARIA, which is Accessible Rich Internet Applications, comes in, because you can, for example, tell a screen reader any text that you want. You can say, scroll down to view the help article or something like that. So you can actually give blind users actual instructions that only they can hear, which adds nothing or detracts nothing from a sighted user's experience. So there's a lot of functionality that you can actually use to interface with a screen reader through a browser, which is super cool.
Wow. Yeah, and I never wonder what ARIA stood for. So that's good to know. I kind of assumed. Oh, sorry.
I was jumping in to be excited about that as well, because for ages I was like, oh, ARIA. And the learner asked once, say like, oh, what does ARIA stand for? And I'd be like, I absolutely know. I totally know what it stands for. But let's look it up just so we can practice looking things up.
Yeah.
But I
Googling
totally
is a
know.
skill that you have to practice. Yes.
Absolutely. For me, it was one of those things where I kind of assumed it had something to do with the type of music, an aria.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, maybe it has to do with that. But it's one of those things where my brain just never went there. Thank you so much. I've got some more questions, if I may.
Yay.
Got a question from Galbrush asking, silly question here. She says, do developers ever put, quote, fun things, unquote, in alt text, as in gems just for the screen readers?
Um, no, I
No.
have seen weird alt text. Like I've seen alt text when it's really obvious that the person who wrote this does not know that I can read it, and they just put in.
Oh,
So like sometimes I encounter things that I'm like, oh, does your employer know you put stuff like this in alt text, or what is this? Um,
oh,
so yeah, I it didn't seem like that was the intention was for someone to find it as a gem,
yeah,
but but like it's I guess it for content writers it totally makes sense to do that. I guess the people that I'm talking to right now are more like web application creators, which
yeah,
in that case usually you're not putting anything in the alt text that's not functional. But if you have a blog and you have an image and you want to explain it in a fun way, that's usually like that's totally fine. um, but if your content and your blog and your readers actually fit that kind of paradigm, uh, but
mm,
if you're in an actual web application, things get a little bit serious because that alt text is going to help someone do something. So, for example, I'm going to take the example of a hotel. That alt text that says I don't know, a view of the front door of the hotel or something like that. Is going to be useful for me taking a screenshot or downloading that image or sending it to someone because I'm like, hey, here's the entrance. Do you think we can, like, does it look like there is a garage door? Because it says nothing in the alt text or something like that. Then I know
ah,
the right image to send to them. But if you're just putting in I don't know, door or really cool door, or here's an opening to the cave that houses the dragon with the dragon eggs or something like that.
right,
Then I'm like, what? But if
right.
you're if this is your blog, totally, I would love to find gems in alt text in a content in a blog, and I would be like, oh wow, this person actually thought that someone with a screen reader at some point is gonna end up in this page. That's great.
Yeah, it's something that, like, myself, I've sometimes wondered, like, sometimes, when I put alt text in my in on tweets or something, that I think to myself, like, do I want to add a little bit of, not 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 like humor, but like personality to my description of
Yes.
the image,
Yeah.
because there's a certain personality to the way I'm
Yes.
pasting the image. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yes. Yes. And I think
Yeah.
that's a great place to actually add that personality to the alt text because you're basically conveying an information that's visible in the image. Uh, and this is where I was saying that AI fails. You're basically conveying a personality, a mood, an underlying sense of why things are the way they are in that image by adding that personality to the alt text. So definitely go ahead, and I'll love to read all of your alt texts.
Well, I don't know if they're that fun. Sometimes they have to be, like, functional as well, like you
Yeah,
said.
yeah, yeah,
Um, cool, thank you. Just actually, I'm gonna read a comment from Jess as well. To Galbrush, I love this question. I'm sometimes tempted to add extra content, and I'm never sure if it's useful.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's true. But I guess it sometimes feels like you're talking into the void when you're putting in alt text, right? Like you don't know when, how someone's going to encounter it, and what they're going to be looking for. And I think
Mm.
I think the more you create alt text and put stuff in there, the more that skill develops. Even though you have no feedback, even though you actually don't get any feedback from actual screen reader users necessarily, the fact that you're thinking about it over time improves your ability to actually provide really really useful alt text. Like I've seen alt text from people that blew my mind, and I just got in touch with them like, hey, I just got to read your blog and your alt text is so great, and then she was like, what's alt text? I mean, I was putting that stuff there. I didn't know what it was for. And I'm like, wow, great. Just by
Wow.
putting stuff there, you've now mastered the skill.
Yeah.
And I told her about that, and she was like, what? Really? Like, blind people are on the internet? I'm like, wait, what?
No, but that's an excellent point. Like it does feel like a muscle you're developing over time. Like you get better
Yeah.
at it with practice.
Yeah. And usually feedback helps, but I guess even in the lack, even when you have the lack of feedback, I can see that people are learning and doing a great job. And any alt text that actually has some thought behind it is better than no alt text.
Totally. Thank you. Got a follow-up question about Bhavin had a question previously about how if whether screen readers describe images. And to follow up on your answer, he asks, so how does one decide which hotel to stay at if you can't see the images? Going
Yep.
just by the description must be a pretty difficult task.
Yep. $1 million question.
Hmm.
And I guess this is where um, having blind friends helps. But also like user studies and user research and actually bringing in some customers and stuff helps because you can actually see their behavior. But like I, as someone who books hotels, I can, for example, tell you that I look at the description, which is not hard because I'm not missing much by not being able to see images. Um, Let me see how to explain that. So the image is probably going to show me how the bathroom looks, which is not something that I can see anyway. So the fact that the bathroom looks a, a certain way doesn't really matter to me. I do have some standards. Like, for example, for me, it's really important that the bathroom is clean. I don't want to go in there and like, oh, so tired. Oh, what's this yucky stuff? And um, w- the stuff that helps there is what are people's reviews about cleanliness? What kind of score did they give for cleanliness in the score that they provide? Is there specific words in their reviews that I can kind of like pick up as kind of a theme? Has someone been here that I can ask? So basically, the way I look for a hotel is by looking at the facilities that it has, by looking at the description and other people's reviews. And my standards are not about how something looks. Mine are mostly around is it clean? Does it have all the stuff that I need? Is the staff going to be available if I need something and don't know where to go look for it and stuff like that, where it's all possible to kind of like learn from the reviews that people have left. So for me, finding a hotel is definitely a lot slower than someone who can browse through images. Um,
Yeah.
but I guess I also take in a lot more information as in the process of that.
Cool. Thank you. Um, got a follow-up question from Omran who asks, is there a special accessibility for colorblind people?
Um, there is a whole topic around that, which because of the fact that I have no clue about colors that I'll steer clear of. But there is like color blindness is very easy to simulate. So there are Chrome extensions and Safari extensions and Firefox extensions that try to basically modify the page and show it to you as if you were colorblind. And you can kind of like choose what ways of color blindness you want to test with. And those are really great. Like, earlier I was talking about ways to functionally test your
Mm-hmm.
web application and see if it's accessible by zooming in or using a screen reader or using tab and shift tab. Um, Adding a color blindness simulator to your toolbox is totally great for something like that, where you can just turn it on and be like, oh, my logo is looking kind of weird now.
Yeah.
And I think most companies don't even realize that their logos is actually not going to be okay for someone who has color blindness, which is weird because now these people are seeing your brand a different way, which is insane when you think about it.
Totally. I'd love to add to that if I may. One thing that I've been confronted with a lot is like with when working with colors, as you were saying, is this concept of color contrast, where if two colors are too similar, especially for if somebody's hard of sight, it becomes harder to distinguish that text from the background. For example, if the color of the text is too similar to the color of the background, then it becomes harder to read.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I've got a comment from Kabi saying that you are very good at answering questions.
Thank you. I'm cute, calm, and good at answering questions. Great.
You're 3 for 3.
Yay.
I got so many other questions. I hope that's fine.
Yes,
Um,
I'm totally like I put everything on the table so that we could do the rest of the content just by going through people's questions. So I'm totally fine.
Wonderful. This is great. Thank you. Bavin's asking, are there any VS Code extensions you would recommend? So I'd love to add on to that. Do you use
Yes, code.
VS Code? Yeah.
Um, no, because it's not as accessible on Mac. I know
Hmm.
that it's very accessible on Windows because the authors of the VS Code application are using, like, they have a very tight feedback loop with blind developers. So 10 points for Microsoft about that. I personally use Emacs for coding because Emacs is basically scriptable. So you can basically write your own screen reader inside Emacs, which is super cool. Because now you can, for example, have different voices for different colors or font weights or all
Oh,
of that stuff. So you can do like syntax. What syntax highlighting, you can actually
yeah.
do all of that with different sound pitches or different sounds and all of that stuff, which is,
Wow.
yeah. So that work has been done by TV Raman, who is I guess a use human interface, uh, like HID. I think that's human interface devices, which is basically he has a PhD in looking at how humans actually interact with computers and how you can actually make that experience much better. And he's also completely blind, and he's been working at Google for, I don't know, like 20 years. And
Wow.
he wrote Emacs Speak, which is basically the screen reader inside Emacs that he used for a lot of these experiments to see how can you use audio icons to convey information, or how can you use like different voices or different pitches to convey different kinds of information. And that's why Emacs is really useful, because if something is not accessible, it's open source, so I can go and modify the code and make it accessible, as
Yeah.
opposed to Mac, because if it's not, then it's not.
Yeah. No, I feel you. Um, you said Emacs Speak, right?
Yeah, so it's Emacspeak. So it's like Emacs and Speak, but the S has been merged into one S, if that
Got
makes
it.
any sense.
Then I've got a link. I'm going to paste that into the chat. This is awesome. I had no idea that was something that you could use, and I never thought of different voice pitches as font weights. That's super cool.
Yeah. And I guess to answer the original question, sorry that I went on a
Oh,
tangent, but I don't actually use VS Code, but I'm sure if you look around, there are a lot of people working on accessibility in VS Code. So probably there are extensions that you could use, um, and and if you're looking at um, actual simulation of like different eye conditions and stuff like that, then I guess the browser is your best bet, and using browser extensions as opposed to VS Code extensions.
awesome. Thank you. Got a question from Patricia asking, is there any accessibility certification you can recommend?
I haven't really gone through any certification. The ones that are offered by um, what is it? International Association of Accessibility Professionals. Wait,
International
I think yes, you need to Google that. International Association of Accessibility Professionals. I think that's what it's called.
of Accessibility Professionals. Ah, yes, IAAP.
Yes. So they provide the, I guess, the industry, the industry standard in terms of different certifications. They work with other companies that do the actual delivery, like the training and stuff like that. But the certification is defined by them. So you can look at, because they have different certifications for project managers and program managers and developers and testers and designers and all of that stuff. So you can look at the certification that matches most closely what you're looking for, and then go for the relevant one that applies to you.
Cool. Thank you. Actually, the next two questions are related, I would say. Dalitz is asking, how verbose should alt text be? I've had feedback saying that alt text should not be very detailed. And
Yeah.
Gulner's asking, does alt text have a character limit?
Right. So the let me try this, and then you all tell me if this makes any sense. But the way I usually explain alt text is, when you want to write an alt text, you just need to basically answer one question: why is this image here? What is it saying? Like what is it conveying? So for example, let's say you're talking about how COVID cases have been dropping very sharply, and you have a chart to show it. So why are you showing this chart? Is it that the drop is sharp and you're basically showing the fact that the trend is down very rapidly? Are you showing that the trend has been decreasing over the last 10 days? Are you showing that, like, I don't know, since January 3rd, for some reason there was a glitch and the numbers are kind of mixed up or weird? And that, once you answer that question of what am I trying to say with this image, the alt text is basically the answer to that question. So then, for example, if I had a chart like that, my alt text would be a chart showing the trend of COVID cases, with a strange blip over January 3rd, or with a sharp drop between January 10th and January 17th, or something like that. So as you can see, the answer to the question of why am I putting this image here informs the alt text, and then the rest is just basically putting that into the alt text. I'm not really aware of any limits. I do know that at some point it was 1024 characters. I don't know if
Okay.
that still applies, but I wouldn't really be worried if you're not writing a whole paragraph. I would try to keep that that alt text small. I totally agree with whoever gave this feedback, but only because you don't need to explain everything. Like, for example, if that chart is also showing information from the beginning of time to January 10th, you don't need to explain, oh yeah, and in 2019 this happened, and then in 2020 this thing happened, and all you need to focus
Yeah.
on is there is a drop from January 10th to January 15th, 17th, and you don't need to be complete. You just need to be concise in terms of use the minimum amount of words to explain the core message of the image. Does that make any sense?
Yes, I think so.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for the question, everybody. Got another one from Khalid, who's asking, what's the status of screen reader accessibility with JavaScript frameworks or libraries like React, etc.? As a screen reader user, can you become a React developer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you can totally become a React developer, because when you're writing the code, you're just writing the code. And then if there's any accessibility issue, then you as a screen reader user, get to fix it in your rendered code. React itself has a lot of accessibility features over the years being integrated into it. So now it has a lot of functionality that makes it accessible. Um, with these things changing every day, it's basically up to every developer using that framework, any framework, I mean, to kind of like figure out, is this useful, is this not? Like, for example, maybe you're using Bootstrap, and I'm like either the JavaScript or the CSS library, and then you're like, Bootstrap, is it accessible? Let me zoom in and see if it breaks. Let me use this color blindness simulation, I guess, extension, and see if everything works all right. Let me just bring up my screen reader and test if it actually works. Some of If you look at the different issues that are open on GitHub, for example, on React, these are actual developers testing their code with some sort of either a screen reader or zooming and so on, and then finding out, oh, here's a problem in React, and let me open an issue around it, and either let me create a pull request to fix it, or let me at least raise awareness about it by creating an issue. So as you actually get to write the code and test it out, you if you do get to any of these issues, please report them, because it's very, very hard to keep a standard for an open source project. So all of these libraries go through phases.
Mm.
And then there's a, ooh, everything is accessible phase, and there's the, oh my god, nothing is accessible phase. And all of these libraries have gone through those phases, and it's really hard to tell at any given time where they are. So
Yeah.
don't rely on the community that develops the library that you're using to do the job of making something accessible. Um, Unfortunately, it's all on you, and it's not that hard. I promise.
Thank you. That's really encouraging. Let's see. We got a question from Sweat and Cookies asking, is
How
there a
do
lot
you combine sweat and cookies?
That's it's one of those things. It's one of those things where I just read the name and don't really think about it. But now that you mention it,
Yeah, I guess. Thanks. Maybe keep the cookies. But okay. Sorry, you were saying the question.
all good, all good. Is there a lot of accessibility in gaming?
So gaming is really fun. In terms of accessibility, I mean, it's also fun to do gaming in general, but it's also fun to do accessible gaming. So games were actually the reason I got into programming. I first So my brothers would used to play PlayStation 1 games, and I would only beat them by pressing all the buttons all the time. And so I was looking for something more meaningful, where I'm not brute forcing it and then winning. So when I was like 14 or so, I discovered a genre of games called audio games. And
Mm.
these are basically games that have no video, and they use audio and the stereo field or the 3D sound rendering engines to create the world that you're in. And when you're doing stuff, there are like for example, if you have a gun, imagine everyone makes a noise, and then when you want to shoot them, you use the arrow keys to center them on your audio field, so as if they're exactly in front of you, and then you shoot and stuff like that. Or maybe doors make a special door creaking sound, so that when you hear them, you're like, oh, there's a door to my left, okay, so I can turn and go to the left, and then there's like a door. So there was basically all of this world building through sound, which is super awesome. So this was what drew me into programming, and then I wrote my own audio game in the beginning. And
Cool.
those games, yeah, they still get developed. There's a bunch of them on iOS that are actually created by sighted developers, and because now everyone's exploring, wait, how can you actually explore um, games through audio? So that's one category, but there's also mainstream um, companies like, and then you have these games like The Last of Us 2, the second one, that actually has accessibility features, and
Yeah, I've seen
you can
those.
Yeah, and then it basically has a built-in screen reader that tells you writings of signs and stuff. So cool. And
Wow.
it lets you go invisible so that you can hear where people are actually moving, so that you can, like, shoot them and stuff. So it adds some accessibility features to make everything um accessible. And if you look up YouTube videos of blind people playing that stuff for the first time, they're going insane, because like this level of a mainstream game being like something that people can play is just not, it's unheard of. And then you can see how these people just go out of their minds as they encounter this really detailed world that they never had access to. And I think it's really motivating for whoever that wants to add accessibility to whatever they're doing, just seeing how happy people are just by being able to do something that you get to do every day. I think
Yeah.
that's super motivating, I hope.
That's remarkable. Thank you. I had never heard of audio games. I'm gonna definitely look into them after this. So thank you for
Nice.
that.
I'll be messaging you as you're gaming throughout the weekend.
Totally fair. So I just want to be very conscious of the time, Barham, because it is the top of the hour now. We've been at this for a good hour, and it is late there. I know that because you're in the same time zone as me.
It is
So
late here.
so I don't want I want to say thank you from my part. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to read you just a couple more comments if I may.
Yeah,
From
sure.
Gulner saying, thank you. From Gulner saying, like, thank you so much for explicitly explaining alt text. I feel like it's not discussed enough. Usually people are like, quote, if your pic doesn't load, unquote. Um, so
Yes,
that's
yes.
fair
Love the
point.
comment. Yes. Yeah, yeah.
And another one says, such a cool topic. Now I'm going to put more attention to my code and my pages. So that's
Yay.
awesome. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're my new best friend.
Thank
I
you.
hope that was not sweat and cookies.
Aw, sweet cookies is awesome. This is a comment from people PMT. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm sometimes struggle to read usernames um, that are creative. So yes, I want to say thank you from my part. This was amazing, Parham. I learned so much. Hey, it's Jess.
I'm just sneaking on as well to say thank you as well. You've been such a good sport about us picking on you and really answering fantastic questions from the learners. You are always a gift, and it is always wonderful to have an excuse to chat to you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks a lot. Thanks for finding opportunities to make me go dumbfounded. Yes,
Yeah.
thanks.
So I think this might be a good time. If somebody wanted to hang out with you online, as it were, where can they, in a non creepy way, stalk you online?
Yes. If you find a non creepy way to stalk me, please let me know. I will be able to apply it to other people. I'm available on Twitter. My username is PD90. I also don't really tweet, but I do answer direct messages. I'm also on LinkedIn. I do post there. I do see messages, so do reach out. I'm also available on my website. It's my full name.com. So that's parhamdoustdar.com. I guess I hear Ramon putting that into the chat. So
Right?
thank
Yes.
you.
I'm wildly jealous. You got first name, last name.com? Like, nice.
Yeah, it's because my first name is not that like, I guess, popular, and my last name is also not that popular, and combine the two and you get a probability of 1% in the world with someone with the same name.
Well,
So
I
that's how it
mean,
is.
I think you'll find, I don't mean to correct you about your own name, but I will, that your first name is so rare and beautiful, and that
Thank
your
you.
surname is so rare and beautiful that to find them together would be like wandering into the jungle to find an
Yes.
unblemished diamond sitting on top of a lamb. Just
Y-
unexpected and delightful.
Carried over by a unicorn even.
Yeah. As we all know about unicorns, it's probably about time for you to turn in for the night. We do have Catherine saying, Parham. I'm just doing a voice. Parham, you're a legend. Thank you so much for the great talk and all the humor.
Oh, thank you.
And before we smother you with weird praise, I will go ahead and say goodbye. For our learners, you might want to come back and join us Saturday for the social, but there's no pressure. Regular lessons will begin again next week. And for those of you who aren't a part of the boot camp, super chill. We do guest sessions on Thursday. Next week, we've got Felina joining us to talk about the joy of reading code. We'll let you go, and we'll see
Ooh.
many of you other places.
Thanks
Bye.
for joining, everybody.
Fun. Bye.